Hey Nines, Mr. CHEN-KE here. Thought we would end the week with a quick review video where we're going to revise a couple of the key concepts and skills that we've learned this week in English. So it's been a pretty big week. We've covered sound and music as a key film technique, and we've also looked at the various themes that are explored in the Truman Show. So I think whenever we have lots of content to cover, it's always good at the end of the week to just pause, reflect on our learning and the skills that we've learned this week, but also hopefully to consolidate our knowledge of these themes or of these concepts, and also consolidate our skills around English. So yesterday we started off with a bit of a warm-up activity. Your job was to think about and define the term theme in your own words. And I think what I gathered from a few of you guys is, whilst you guys have an intuitive understanding of what theme is, it's one of those concepts that is deceptively hard to define. All of us have studied theme before, we've heard the word before. In fact, we've probably been studying themes in literature and movies for years in English, but it is one of those terms that is deceptively difficult to define. So we established that a theme is a universal idea, lesson, or message that's explored throughout a text. And that text could be a book, a short story, a poem, and in our case, a film. And it's important to recognize that themes are universal. They're not just limited or confined to a singular text. For example, in The Truman Show, the theme of love is explored through Truman and Sylvia's relationship. But the theme of love is not just explored in The Truman Show. It is a universal theme that is explored in multiple other works of art. We also established, with dot point number 2, that theme often refers to the meaning behind a story and is expressed through the plot, so the events that occur in the story, and also the characters' individual journeys. We also know that themes are never explicitly stated. You're never going to open up a book and on the first page the author tells you straight away what the book is about. You're never going to open up, say, Harry Potter, and on the first page it says, this book is about friendship and how sticking together through hard times helps us become better friends, and how friends can defeat enemies together. It's never explicitly stated. Rather, it's usually implied by the author. So oftentimes themes appear as a lesson or a message that the audience understands by reading between the lines. So you might be wondering, what does reading between the lines mean, and how do I actually read behind the lines or between the lines? And we'll get to that in a minute. But for some of you guys, we've got related definitions of theme. So you can also define theme as what the author wants us to learn, what they want us to know, what they're trying to convey to the audience. Theme can also be defined as what the story teaches the audience, a moral. And last but not least, themes can also be defined as a universal concept that often reveals something about human nature. So, a lot of you guys probably would have been thinking yesterday, so we know what themes are, I can define them now, but how do I actually find and identify themes in films or any piece of work for that matter? And I always try to do that by sort of focusing on these focus questions. So one way to identify theme in a text is to ask yourself, what is this text or what is this film about? What does the director or the author, if you're studying a book, want the audience, me, to leave thinking and feeling? You can also identify themes by looking at the plot of the film. So what actually happens throughout the film? What are the key events and what do they reveal about themes? This is where the narrative arcs that you guys completed earlier on in this unit come in very handy. Characters are often put in a story as well to explore themes. So you want to think about all the obstacles, all the hurdles that Truman must overcome, the internal and external conflicts that Truman deals with throughout the film. In all stories, Year 9s, the character, the protagonist, desperately desires something. In our case, you could argue that perhaps Truman desires freedom. He wants to be free from the manipulative grasp of Christoph. He wants to be free to experience the real world. Ladies and gents, oftentimes, as you probably would be realizing, when we consider the character's desires, that implicitly tells us what the theme of the story is. We know that Truman desires freedom, He wants to be free of the manipulative and oppressive grasp of Christoph. And look what we've just identified. We know that now theme is a key, that freedom, is a key theme in the Truman Show. Perhaps oppression and manipulation are also key themes in the Truman Show. So when you ask yourself these questions, oftentimes you'll come out of it with a deeper understanding of what themes are explored in a specific text. Now, I thought we'd also look at this visual metaphor again, so this idea of the iceberg. Now, often what's visible is the plot and the story. Most of us have a pretty good comprehension of what goes on in a film or in a story. And most of us understand what the characters' conflicts are. We understand what drives them, what the characters desire. We understand what hurdles and obstacles these characters must overcome. And it's all good and well to understand and comprehend the plot of a story, as well as the conflicts the characters go through. But what's important is we sort of look beneath the surface here. We look beneath the water. And oftentimes when we look beneath and use plot, story, and characters as a bit of a lens into the deeper meaning of a story, that's where we come up with our interpretation of what a story's theme is. So let's go through this example. So The Boy Who Cried Wolf is a famous fable. So fables are short stories that often have a moral, a lesson, or a message at the end of them. And fables are a really good way to practice identifying themes. So I'm going to read this fable out to you guys. So The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Long ago there was a young cheeky boy who looked after some sheep near a village. The boy was often bored. One day he played a trick on the villagers to pass the time. "Wolf, wolf," he shouted loudly. The villagers came running up the hill to save the sheep. However, when they got there was no wolf. The boy laughed at them. "I tricked you," he said. "You must not tell lies," said the villagers angrily, and went back to the village. Soon, the boy was bored again. He thought for a minute and shouted, "Wolf! Wolf!" Again, the villagers rushed up the hill to save the sheep. The boy laughed at them. "I tricked you again," he said. "You must not tell lies," shouted the villagers. They hurried back down to the village. Later that day, a huge wolf really did come into the field. The boy cried and cried, "There's a wolf! Wolf!" This time the villagers didn't believe the boy. No one came to help, and the wolf ate all of the sheep. So, what is the message that we can take away from this fable? What is the lesson that we can learn from reading this fable? Well, I've said, I think one of the major themes is deception and lies. Do not deceive people or lie to them. People won't believe you when you tell the truth, and you'll lose people's trust eventually. I think that's one of the big lessons that we can take away. And I think another message in The Boy Who Cried Wolf is about honesty and truth. When you are honest, people generally will trust you. So a really good way, ladies and gents, to practice identifying themes, these universal lessons, messages, ideas in a story, is to read fables. So I highly recommend you perhaps Google some fables and have a read of them because they're nice and short, and try to identify some of the themes. Okay, so we're kind of getting to the rear end of where we left off yesterday. So we learned yesterday about thematic concepts and thematic statements. Now, we know themes can be divided into these two categories. A thematic concept is just a broader topic that a book, a film, or any kind of text touches upon. For example, the topics that are covered in The Truman Show and explored in The Truman Show include privacy, reality, commercialism, so this idea that we have become money hungry and greedy, and also manipulation. Now, on the flip side, a thematic statement is what the text says about that topic. So what does The Truman Show have to say about privacy? What does it have to say about reality? What does Peter Weir, the director of The Truman Show, aim to convey or tell us or teach us about this idea of commercialism or manipulation? So here's an example. We know that one of the major topics, thematic concepts explored in The Truman Show, is commercialism, which is this growing concern or obsession with making money. It's all about profit. It's all about money. And we see this through the fundamental concept of what the Truman Show is. It's a TV show, and TV shows need to make money to survive, to stay on the air. So we know that the Truman Show is broadcasted 24/7, which means there are no ad breaks. So what's one of the ways that Christoph and his production team have come up with to make money? Well, we know that's through product placement. So you'll have these scenes where Meryl especially will just whip out random products to advertise on TV. And Marlon, when he's sitting with Truman, notice he's always product placement, or he's always advertising a special brand of beer. Now, we know commercialism is a big theme or big topic explored in the Truman Show. Now, when we write our thematic statement based on this thematic concept, we want to ask ourselves, what is the Truman Show trying to say about commercialism? What's it trying to reveal to us about commercialism? What's it trying to show us, the audience, and teach us, the audience, about commercialism? So I've written this as a statement. The Truman Show criticizes commercialism and reveals to the audience the highly unethical practices that greedy networks and big companies partake in just to make a profit. So essentially what I'm trying to say here about, or what the film is trying to say about commercialism, is that you've got these big companies who want to sell a product, and they're willing to go to such extreme lengths to be associated with a show like The Truman Show that essentially is a massive infringement on one's human rights. They're willing to associate themselves with these shows and go to these great lengths just to make money, just to sell their products and make a profit. So ladies and gents, that's an example of how you can turn a thematic concept into a thematic statement. Always remember, a thematic concept is just a broad topic that a story touches upon. A thematic statement is what that text, so a book or a film, has to say about that topic. So your first task yesterday was to write a couple of thematic statements based on 4 thematic concepts that you guys chose. And these were some of the thematic concepts in The Truman Show. So we have commercialism or consumerism, manipulation and deceit, rebellion, utopia versus dystopia, privacy, surveillance, mass media, reality, and I'll move my head, ethics. So your job was to choose 4 of these thematic concepts and write me a thematic statement for each of them. Afterwards, I wanted you guys to have a go at this second task. So you're supposed to choose one of the thematic statements that you wrote and turn that into a larger thematic paragraph, outlining in greater detail how your selected theme is explored in The Truman Show. So your job was to begin by literally restating one of your thematic statements. You can copy and paste it. And then explain how your selected theme is explored in The Truman Show in more detail. So can you recall a specific moment or a scene in the film that relates to your chosen theme? Are there some quotes that reflect your theme? And which characters and the experiences that they go through represent your chosen theme? Finally, you want to tie it all together by telling me in a quick sentence or 2, what is the importance of your selected theme to the story? So in the grand scheme of things, why is your theme important to the story? So that was part 1 of what you guys should have got done yesterday. Now, you might have been able to get a start on part 2, but if not, that's okay. You've got the rest of today's period to get started on this. So, for part 2, I wanted you guys to continue identifying themes in The Truman Show, but also consider the director's meaning behind the way that they've sort of constructed these themes. So your job today is to create a thematic mind map. So I first want you to make a list of 3 themes that are explored in The Truman Show. Now you can use the themes from slide 13. You could choose 3 of them, or you could come up with your own, because by no means are these 8 thematic concepts an exhaustive detailed list. These are just some of the main themes. You can choose other ones if you're interested in a theme that isn't on that slide. So firstly, I want you to make a list of 3 themes that are explored in The Truman Show. However, you can also identify your own. Secondly, For each of these themes, I want you to place them in the center of an A4 page. So you can get a blank piece of A4 paper out, or you can get your English workbooks out, and you can write in the center of your page your chosen theme. And you want to have 3 different pages for each of your 3 different themes. Thirdly, I want you to identify the characters who are related to each of your chosen themes and indicate in what way they are related or exhibit this theme. So come up with a couple of characters that represent and are related to your chosen theme. Number 4, indicate where this theme is evident in the Truman Show. So in what specific scenes or events do we see this theme being played out? Are there specific settings, perhaps, where we see this theme in action? Number 5, can you come up with some specific quotes and or symbols that convey your selected themes? If you can, add them to your visual mind map as well. And last but not least, number 6, I want you to tell me the overall message of the director. What are they trying to say about this theme? I've done an example for you guys. So, just move my little head here. Okay, so I've chosen the theme of entrapment, which is to be trapped in something. Now, we know that this is a major theme in the Truman Show because essentially Truman is trapped inside the world of Sea Haven, not just physically, but mentally as well. So let's start on the top left-hand corner of this mind map. So I've started off with characters. Now, we know Truman very much reflects the theme of entrapment because he's physically and mentally trapped in Sea Haven. Christoph is another character that does the trapping. He's the one that keeps Truman trapped in Sea Haven by creating a number of irrational fears, as well as manipulating the setting. So one of the fears that Truman has that's created by Christoph is the fear of water. Now remember, he has that boating accident where he supposedly loses his father. So for the rest of his life, he is frightened of the water. So he'll never be able to escape Sea Haven because you have to either get a boat out of here, which he'll never do, or even drive over water, which he can't do because he's so petrified of it. Also, Christoph manipulates the setting to keep Truman trapped. Think of that end scene where Truman is trying to escape on the boat and Christoph turns into like a game maker from the Hunger Games, where he's controlling the elements of Sea Haven to keep him trapped. Some of the key events that show Truman being trapped is when he tries to escape by bus, but the bus breaks down and he can't leave Sea Haven. When he tries to escape with Meryl in the car, but roadblocks and obstacles are set up along the way to stop him from leaving the town. And another event is when Christoph creates, when we see in that flashback, the illusion that Truman's father drowns to death and therefore he cannot escape over water. One of the key quotes that I found in the film that's related to entrapment is when the bus driver says, everybody off, we've got a problem. Then he looks at Truman, who is dejected and says, I'm sorry, son. I thought that was an interesting moment of vulnerability because you've got to remember the bus driver isn't actually a bus driver. He's an actor. He's a human. And I think in that moment, he sort of felt bad that he was trapping or part of the problem and part of the reason why Truman was trapped in this world. I also looked at the symbol of the sea and water because the sea and water essentially, if you think about it, the sea and water sometimes symbolizes freedom because it sort of symbolizes the vast expanse of the sea. But in this case, in the film, it actually symbolizes trauma and entrapment. And last but not least, I think what the director Peter Weir's message is through entrapment is that every human has the right to think and live freely without being controlled by entrapment and psychological manipulation. So, that's your job today. Come up with 3 themes and create a visual mind map for each of those themes, looking at character, events, quotes, symbols, and finally, the director's message. So, ladies and gents, I hope you guys have enjoyed the video, and I hope this video explains not just the tasks in a little bit more detail, but I hope it's also consolidated some of your learning around themes this week. If you do have any questions, please fire me an email. Otherwise, hope you enjoy the rest of this lesson, and I wish you guys all a wonderful weekend. Not long to go now before you guys return to school on site, so I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys in the flesh for the first time in what feels like an eternity. Stay safe and happy learning. Bye, guys.